Are you playing to win or just running out the clock? In sports, the game clock drives every decision. It creates urgency, sharpens focus, and pushes players to perform their best. So what if you treated your life with that same sense of urgency? I've created an exercise to help you do just that. It's called Your Game Clock. Download Your Game Clock today at bill-burke.net/clock. It's free, it's simple, yet transformative, and it could be the first step towards achieving peak performance in the areas of your life that matter the most. Remember, life isn't a practice run. Every second counts, and your time is now. JR, welcome to the show. Great to have you. Great to connect with you again. I know I was on your show a while back, so full circle moment here for us both. And just love your story and where you're coming from. I want to make sure that the audience is aware of you and the great things that you're doing. So if you want to start just by giving us a little bit of background on you. I know we share some similarities and some common ground. So just give us the story on who JR Butler is.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, Bill. So my background, I'm originally from central Massachusetts. I'm the oldest son of a Hall of Fame high school hockey coach. My dad coached Marlboro High School for over 30 years. I'm the oldest of three boys. We all played college hockey. One of my brothers actually played in the NHL and the Olympics. I think the best way to describe my childhood is I was all hockey all the time, my whole identity, my whole purpose. I got an opportunity to play at a college I probably wouldn't have got into without the game, which is, I think, what the goal should really be for young athletes. Played at Holy Cross, was part of a team that upset the University of Minnesota, considered the biggest upset in college hockey history to this day. It was almost 20 years ago. And then literally woke up one day and wasn't a hockey player anymore.
Right.
And it's a big turning moment and turning point in my life. And I didn't handle it well, to be honest with you. For 5 or 6 years, I struggled emotionally, mentally. I had my own battles with things like substance abuse, anxiety, depression. Went through a few things and then slowly but surely got back on my feet, realized that a lot of the stuff I developed for the first 23 years of my life were going to be very relevant for the next 50, and started applying myself to my business career the same way I applied myself to my hockey career. Spent 17 years as a sales leader in the kind of fast growth technology world, was part of some great companies, including a acquisition, became a chief revenue officer, had some success there. And a couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to help people like me that were struggling with that transition out of uniform, that loss of identity, that loss of purpose, but also help people like me that were trying to build winning teams in business. And that's how Shift Group started. And Shift Group, we help athletes and veterans look in the mirror, do some self-discovery, do some career discovery, career upskilling, and create essentially digital profiles that are viewed by hundreds of our paying customers, because our training program is free for athletes and veterans. And in 2 years, we placed over 1,000 athletes and veterans, mostly in entry level sales roles, but we're quickly expanding into other verticals, other career paths. And now my entire mission in my life is to make sure that folks don't have to deal with the pain and suffering that I did during my transition and after. And I think the thing that we've learned a lot over the last 2 years, is deal with it. It sticks around, right? We get a lot of folks that are in their 30s and 40s that are former athletes and veterans that are still trying to find themselves again, still trying to find something that they can apply themselves to the way they did in uniform. And it's been an awesome run with Shift Group, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's amazing work. That's an amazing mission. I love it. And we, of course, are aligned. I wrote a book about that exact topic because I struggled with it just like you did. It's not an easy thing. And I think it's a thing that not a lot of people from the outside are really aware of. You just see the athletics and the games and the uniforms and all the highlights. You don't really see what goes on after the last game is played. And to be harsh about it, I think a lot of the fans really don't necessarily care. They've gotten what they needed out of it. They've been entertained and they've watched a lot of great games and seen a lot of great memories. But yeah, it's a real thing. So I think that's awesome. But I want to go back just a second. And you mentioned when your revelation happened that you could apply the things that you've learned as an athlete to another career or another life, so to speak. I think that's something that's so interesting because so many athletes, like you mentioned, they don't have that revelation or it happens way later than maybe it should. So, was there a trigger moment or some sort of event that really woke you up and said, hey, what I did does translate? Because I know I spent a lot of years not seeing the correlation, surprisingly, between what I had done. I thought that was its own entity and it couldn't really be used in other areas. I didn't see the connection. So, what was that revelation like for you specifically?
It's funny. I talk about it anytime I speak in front of a large group of athletes. I tell a story. It was really when my little brother, signed an NHL contract. Part of the collective bargaining agreement in the NHL is the team that plays the rookie has to fly up the whole family to the first game, wherever it is in the world or in the country or North America, I should say. So we got flown out to Ottawa because that's where my brother signed his first NHL contract to see him play the New York Rangers. And I was still struggling, drinking a lot, doing other stuff I shouldn't be doing. And seeing my brother the day of the game, really approaching things like a professional, right? This is my little brother, mind you, right? And he'll tell you he looked up to me eh, his whole childhood and teenage years. And here I was a few years older than him, struggling in my world. And I just had this kind of epiphany moment like, just because I'm not a professional athlete doesn't mean I'm not a professional. And I think I was seeing what he was doing. I was impressed by it, but I was also like, dude, I did that. Like, I can do that. And I ended up in a career where if I approached my day to day the same way that he was doing it, I could make seven figures. Right. And that's ultimately sports is unique and you don't necessarily love it for the potential to make a lot of money. You just love the game. But at the
Yeah.
same time, like the reason I wanted to be a professional hockey player was so I could make a lot of money. And I had this opportunity where it's, dude, you can actually make more money in this new career that you like tripped and fell into by complete accident. And that's when the switch went off for me. And I'll tell you, I didn't get better the next day, especially when it comes to substances. It took me some time, some mistakes, but that was the turning point for me was seeing my younger brother, really taking advantage of the opportunity he had. And I was mad that I didn't have that opportunity, but I had a very similar opportunity. And the only way I was going to take advantage of it was operating the same way he did. So that was for me, that was like the wake up moment, the epiphany moment.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure you realized, the window for professional athletes to make seven figures, if you can even do that, is so small, but you could also make seven figures in business and do it for a lot longer than some of the athletes do. It's such a small window that it's no reason that it's no surprise that they try and take advantage of those big contracts because they know how short lived a lot of those are. I want to talk about Shift Group because, again, that's such an amazing mission. And really, the goal is to turn athletes into sales professionals. So, what inspired you really to build that company? You alluded to it already. And what challenges did you face in getting that off the ground, especially initially from when you started?
Well, the idea was like, obviously, I talked about why I started the transition side of it to help there, but I also was a hiring manager for most of my career. You're basically, as a sales leader, you're given a quota, and it's like, all right, go build, here's your P&L, like, go build a team. And what I found was a piece of paper, like a resume, and four or five 30-minute conversations that's how we hire today. And it's really hard in an interview process and with a resume to figure out if somebody's resilient and coachable and has a growth mindset and is like the type of person that's going to put the team first. And there's stuff on a resume that's important, right? Industry specific experience and selling to a certain type of person and deal size and all those things are important. I'm not trying to discount those, but those are much less indicative of success than these intangible characteristics. And when you think about those characteristics, resiliency, coachability, a growth mindset, team first, right? Those are things that are table stakes to play sports at the college level or higher or to serve in the military, full stop. So that's what I did. I literally would just be like, that was my preference was always to hire someone from that background. And I was a lot more successful when that was like the first the first like requirement over when it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I was like, and I know hundreds, obviously thousands of leaders that think that same way. So I saw an opportunity to monetize it. The part that was hard at the beginning, Bill, was like I didn't want to go out and charge 23-year-old, 25-year-old folks that were like getting out of uniform for the first time because I didn't have any money back then. So I had to figure out a way like how could I do this and make money. The good thing is I had worked with recruiters in my past life, so I knew how that model works. So that's I tried that out initially and it worked. Like we were able to I was able to like one-to-one kind of hand-to-hand combat train these folks, connect them with my network and get paid to do it. I think the challenge at first was like I couldn't scale myself, so I had to like bring in other people that I trusted that were going to teach these folks the right way. And that was a good challenge, obviously, to have, because that's a growth challenge. Now, I started the company at the beginning of 2022. So if you talked to me in May 2022, I would have been like, oh, this is going to be a $10 million in 2 years, no problem. And then if anybody remembers the summer of 22, interest rates shot up and tech went through a complete downturn, right? You had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people got laid off, all that like low interest rate, COVID money was gone. And I remember very distinctly, like sitting on the floor. I was living in Scottsdale, Arizona at the time, laying on the floor. We had like probably 20 customers at the time, and 10 of them reached out within 24 hours and were like, we're firing people. I'm getting fired. Our typical point of contact was someone in HR or talent acquisition. I'm getting fired. Or the third email was like, we're not hiring 6 months. Like we
Yeah.
lost half of our customers overnight. I was like, shit, I have to go look for a chief revenue officer job. And it was probably like half a day of feeling sorry for myself and then being like, you know what, dude, I set out to do this. We can figure this out. We can get through it. Thankfully, I didn't have a lot of overhead. I had hired two really good people at that time, three, counting my assistant. And we just huddled and we're like, all right, we just got to bear down. We got to figure out how to create opportunity. And we got through it, thankfully. And we're able to end up putting together a great year in 2022, a better year in 2020. And then 2024 was year ever by about 100%. It's never easy being a founder, starting a business from scratch, but I'm almost like a product of my own strengths and weaknesses in the sense that there's things about running a business that I'm not very good at that I've since hired people that are very good at. But the one thing that I am good at is driving revenue. And when you do that, you can solve the other problems pretty easily.
Yeah. An important piece of running a business. So
Yes,
it's good that you're strong
yeah,
in that department.
totally.
So speaking of being the CEO, this show is all about mental toughness. So there's many hats that you need to wear. There's variables coming at you probably every minute of the day. So how do you how do you stay mentally tough in those moments? Are you drawing upon your time as an athlete? Are there other things that you're adding to that list or that arsenal that you've learned since you started a business? How do you stay mentally tough in those challenging times?
I think the biggest lesson I think I got from my dad and my mom growing up as an athlete was controlling the controllables. I'm sure you've seen the Venn diagram, right? There's stuff that matters and there's stuff that you can control. And the only place you want to focus is where those two overlap, right? I can't control the interest rate. I can't control layoffs. Now we're a much bigger company. We're over 20 people. And I think we run into challenges all the time. And my immediate like mental math in my head is like, all right, can we control this? And does it matter? And there's a difference between stress and pressure. Stress is when you worry about stuff that you can't control, and pressure is good. You hear me say it all the time, pressure is a privilege, right? That means we're being counted on. So I try to avoid stress at all costs. Like just don't try to pay attention to things that float into my head that matter, but that I can't control, and just remind myself, like, okay, that sucks, but what are you going to do about it, dude? Like, just move on. And I think that is probably the best tool I have when it comes to dealing with the stresses of being a CEO and building a business and having 20 people plus rely on you for a living. Like, these are all things that make it really hard. But at the end of the day, if we control the controllables, like we're going to be fine. And everything else is just noise at this point for me.
Yeah, no, that's so good. In my book I broke down four different quadrants. There's the controllable, there's the uncontrollable, the unacceptable, and the non-negotiable. So the two that you just mentioned are so crucial, but I think a lot of people they don't they that those lines are so blurry, they don't pause to say, okay, do I even have control over this? And then they spend all that mental energy, emotional energy, spend their time doing that. So I think that's so crucial. And it's all about awareness, right? Knowing what's going on with you and in your business and in your world before you can even start to address the issues. Your work with the Shift Group really bridges the gap or two worlds, sports and business. So, what parallels do you see between the mental toughness aspects of each? Obviously, we just mentioned overlap a little bit. So, there's obvious overlap there. But from your perspective, what have you seen maybe in your daily business life with starting this company that immediately flashes you back to a time where you were on the ice and you've seen that direct correlation or the light bulb has gone on about how you can mentally approach whatever issue you're facing at that time?
Yeah, I think the biggest parallel is like wins and losses, right? Like you lose in business way more actually, because I've played for some pretty good teams, but I've from a business perspective, I've lost way more, especially as a sales guy, dude, way more than I've won. And I think one of the things that you do as an elite athlete, especially, is yeah, you get down, like it sucks when you lose, and it's a struggle, but the great athletes tend to look at it and say, okay, what did I learn here? Like, how did this loss, like, how can I use what I just went through to get better so it doesn't happen again that way, at least, right? And I think if you can do that in business, like, game over. Because again, like, if you look at it as either a win or a learning opportunity, then now all of a sudden in business, you get a lot of opportunities to learn. And I think that's probably the best parallel that's created for me, at least, mental toughness, significant mental toughness as a salesperson, as a leader, as somebody running a company. Is where again, like you look at the CRM, there's a lot more closed lost opportunities than closed won. But it's okay, what was the learning opportunity in that loss? And how can we make sure that the next time we're faced with a similar situation, it doesn't happen again, or at least we're more prepared for it? So I think that's one of the many, and that's like on the mental toughness side. I could go on for hours about the similarities between sports and business. I know
Sure.
you and I have done that before, but from a mental toughness perspective, I think it's what you win or you learn. That's how you get through the hard times.
No, that's again, I think it's just all about how you approach it mentally, and you're so right. I mean, if you look at the fact that if you look at it like that, you can't lose. You start to just smile and gain a lot of confidence from understanding that there's no way to lose if you're either winning, which is the
Yeah.
goal in the first place, or you're learning to get better for next time. That's a great perspective. Do you have maybe a specific example of a setback that you faced in starting this company and how you handled that, how you navigated through it, how you overcame it? Because you mentioned all the swings you have to take in business with CRM and reaching out to people and running down leads. Is there one that jumps out or stands out that you're proud of in the fact that you overcame it and maybe even ultimately won the business in the end?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I got hundreds of examples. I like going back to that story I talked about in like kind of the spring of 22 after like we're buzzing. I'm like, there's going to be a $10 million company. We lose half of our customers in a 24-hour period. And you start looking on LinkedIn and all of a sudden all these roles that you were working are just disappearing. The way I ended up dealing with it once I got off the floor and I was like, all right, suck it up, dude. You don't want to go back to working for someone else or anything like that. Is it was creativity. I said, okay, like these companies, and back then we were working with, again, this is like the crazy hiring period in tech that we went through. A lot of big publicly traded companies that were hiring from us. And I'm like, all right, well, we know that there's still venture money entering the technology industry, probably now more than ever, because venture has leverage. Venture loves leverage. Money loves leverage. So we knew that there was capital going into the tech market. And when an investor gives a company capital, they give it because they want growth. And you don't grow without growing your team. So what we did was I went out and I literally, instead of cold calling sales leaders and talent acquisition, I started cold calling and reaching out to the venture community, looking for raises, saying, hey, like you guys have X amount of portfolio companies. You just invested X amount of millions into this organization. I'm sure you want resilient, coachable, growth minded, team first salespeople to help build this business. Let's partner. We'll get aggressive. And that is literally for 6 months. That's how we drove 90% of our revenue, was just by going after VC, PE firms that were like investing in businesses and wanted to grow. We had to go find growth organizations. So we went to where it started, which is with the capital. I'm really proud of that. And it created a whole nother revenue stream for us, a way to grow our business that initially wasn't even a thought for me. Seems obvious now, like looking back, yeah, I probably should have done that from the start, but I didn't need to. So the need is what made me kind of pivot.
That's great. I want to shift gears for a second, no pun intended, but I know that recently you had a little bit of a health scare. And I know that we get so wrapped up as former athletes and professionals in business and work. And of course, we spend most of our day on those things. But there can be things that come out of nowhere and level us, so to speak, mentally and emotionally, and really put things into perspective, not just within the small bubble that is the business world. But talk a little bit about how you handle that and maybe how that came to be in your initial reaction, and then ultimately, again, going back to the mental fortitude that you've been able to acquire and build over the years. How did you apply that to what you were going through at that time?
Yeah, so for context, the day after Labor Day it started, I started like randomly fainting. And because of my Irish Catholic upbringing, I ignored it for 4 days. And it happened 4 times in 4 days. On the fifth time it happened, it was like I was on a call and it was very obvious that what was going on was not just stress. It was not just like something I could shake off, basically. So I ended up going to the ER and it kept happening. And by then I was attached to all these machines. I was literally waking up, Bill, to like nurses and doctors about to give me the paddles. So what was happening was I was going into cardiac arrest every time I fainted. It happened like 22 times in 11 days. Yeah, it was scary and it was really hard. And I think like the hardest part about it, going back to the things that matter and the things you can control, is like I'm a healthy dude. I haven't had a drink in almost 13 years. I don't use hard drugs. I work out 5 times a week. I eat really healthy. I'm like probably at certain points, depending on the stress level at work, I'm in better shape than I was when I played Division 1 hockey, candidly. And I definitely have a healthier lifestyle than I did when I played Division 1 ice hockey. So the thing that sucked about this was like all like 100% out of my control. Whatever it is, like a defect, most likely hereditary, because I lost a grandfather at 38, a great grandfather at 36, and I was 39. How did I get through it is I kind of, number one, accepted that it was like not in my control. And number two, what it did for me, if I'm being really honest, is it just made me appreciate like how little time we have and how the only thing you can do is be present in every moment that you're in, because that's really all you have, right? There's a saying, the past is nothing but like a memory and an idea. The future is the same idea. It's just an idea. The only thing that we have right now is the current moment. That's why it's called the present, because it's a gift. So that was the biggest impact it had on me going through what I went through, was like just making sure that when I'm somewhere, I'm where my feet are, basically. And this is important as a business owner. For me, like I'm a young father. I'm a 19-month old, the second one coming in April, newly married. I got a big family with a lot of nephews and nieces. My parents are getting older. Like there's a thing about like work life balance. Like I don't necessarily I believe in work life integration. Like dude, I'm built different in that I am gonna work my ass off in my business every day, all day, and that's just who I am. But you bet your ass nowadays, like when I go home, like work is off, my phone is off. Like when I'm with my son and my wife, I'm with my son and my wife. But when I'm here, again, I don't know if I really answered your question there, but that was the impact that it had on me. And I think like being able to control the current moment is such a powerful, because you can, right? Like again, going back to controlling the controllables, I can control whether or not I'm present in the moment. I really that's pretty much all I can control in some cases. So that's made everything for me a lot easier. It also makes you appreciate the little things in a really unique way that I don't think most people my age and in my kind of career trajectory, and they don't really get that gift that I got because of what I went through. And I ended up, by the way, just to put a wrapper on this, is ended up having to get a pacemaker. And if I hear one more doctor go, "Oh, you're a little young for a pacemaker," I might snap on
Yeah.
them. But that's where I'm at now. So I got
Yeah.
Iron Man mask back here because I'm bionic now.
There you go. That's awesome. No, I think everything happens for a reason, man, and it's tough to understand sometimes. But when I had mine, I think it just opened my eyes to really all the things that I had left that I still had not done yet, and the idea of wanting to maximize my full potential, whatever that ceiling is, and feeling like I hadn't even come close to that yet. And having my athletic career end in my early 20s, I didn't want that to be the peak. So, this health scare, this thing that I live with now, is just a reminder. And it opened my eyes to this whole concept of memento mori. I don't know if you're familiar with that as well, but it's a Stoic saying, just translated, remember you will die. And some people go, whoa, I don't want to talk about that. That's morbid. But it's really an empowering reminder that we're here for a brief time, just like our athletic careers are so short. Our lives, relatively speaking, are so short. Yeah, whatever it takes to focus you in on whatever type of life that you want to live, I think is a blessing and a gift, as you mentioned. I'm just glad you're healthy and you caught it and you're on the right track, and we're having this conversation now. Thanks for sharing that. I know that a lot of people out there do deal with these different types of health issues. It's just almost unavoidable in some capacity, whether it's you yourself or somebody in your family. No, that's awesome. It's just another way to apply those mental toughness skills. And speaking of that, you're building a company, you built a team. How do you pour into your team, maybe even some of the people that are younger and don't have the background that you do? How do you instill that mental toughness and resilience in your team members, in knowing what they might be facing in their day to day as well?
I think obviously we have like KPIs and we track everything that we're trying to accomplish. And I think, especially our team, everybody in my entire company is a former elite athlete, so college or higher, or served in the military. So a little bit of an advantage there.
Hmm.
But at the same time, they're going to lose a lot in what we're trying to do because we have lofty goals, and that's a good thing, right? So I think just constantly when they I always say if you're going to report the news, like just think of yourself, separate yourself from the outcome, report it without emotion. And when it's a negative news story, make sure you're coupling the negative with the learning opportunity. So it's like literally just constantly reminding everybody in the organization, from the 5 or 6 entry level salespeople we have all the way up to my, hey, we got this bad news. It's okay. Well, what did we learn? I'm trying to remind them that there's always a good side to a loss or to a failure. And that's like the role I play here is like CEO, but chief culture officer. Remind them,
Hmm.
like, especially, dude, if you're trying to do like cool shit and like big stuff and like new stuff, like you have to expect that you're going to fail. Like that means that you're working on something special and you're trying to achieve special things. So if you weren't losing, that means you're not challenging yourself enough, candidly. And that's, I think, the big reminder that I need to give them constantly.
Yeah. Another way to look at that I always look at it as, if you feel stuck, you're that means you're winning because you're applying that pressure to that situation. You're striving to do something great. You wouldn't feel that pressure if you weren't trying to accomplish something big. So, what would your advice be to somebody that's maybe starting their own business or starting their professional career in terms of staying mentally tough? Maybe some of the people that don't have that athletic background, you're obviously at an advantage from the people that you hire, given your insight and what you know about hiring the right types of people with their backgrounds. But maybe some people that don't have that background, what are maybe 2, 3 things that they can lean on to become mentally tough as they start this process of learning how to build up that callus and that skill of mental toughness?
Yeah, I think, well, number one is like paying attention to the experiences, the outcomes, like all the things you're tracking in your career, and make sure you understand the difference between the things that matter, the things that you can control, and where they cross over, right? So that's number one, is understand that you're going to get stressed out if you don't accept something as a non-controllable thing. So like being really clear about what you can control and what you can't control and the difference between the two. Number two is like when you do fail, force yourself to say, what did I learn here? What could I have done differently? So it's this combination of accepting the things you can't control, but like also having an like extreme ownership at the same time, where it's, did I really do everything in this situation that I could have done? Because ultimately, I don't care how good you are at your job and how great your career is going. There are going to be things where you're like, I probably should have studied a little longer. I should have paid more attention. I should have reviewed those notes or prepared more for that meeting or that interview or whatever it is, right? Having a little bit of extreme ownership on that. And I would say the last part, dude, is like life is short. Have fun. I don't care if you're an accountant, if you're a teacher, if you're sales, whatever. Like we spend 33% of our natural living lives working. Full stop. Unless
Mm-hmm.
you're like personally wealthy and come from family money, you are going to spend a third of your time making a living. You've got to have fun in the process, right? And by the way, like that makes all the other stuff, the losses, the learning on what you can do, makes it a lot easier. So you got to just check yourself. Remind yourself, am I having fun? Is this fun? And figure out a way to make it fun, because that just makes everything easier, man. And like I said, life's too short not to have fun in the process. I think if you can bring those three things, you can understand the controllables and focus on those. You can learn from every loss, and you can have fun in that whole process. Like you're going to be able to get through a lot of tough shit. At least that's what my
Yeah,
experience has been.
no doubt. So you're in a position now to lead people, obviously, and mentor them. Is there somebody that's been really integral in your life in mentoring you and maybe in the athletic world, or maybe a family member that's really had a big impact on your own mental toughness and getting you through those hard times? Maybe even an expression or a quote that they said over and over again that you go back to when you're faced with something that's really difficult.
Yeah, there's no bigger impact and no bigger impact on me than my mom and my dad. And my dad's got, they both have some of the most famous one liners in the world. But I just think, like, generally, these are two people that were like really grew up with nothing. I'm the first person in my entire family to graduate to apply to college, let alone graduate from college. And they built us like a really good life, and we didn't want anything growing up. And these were not easy times. My dad lost his father at 16 years old. My
Wow.
mom's parents, like my mom didn't grow up with anything. And I just think like their general work ethic, and it says it right behind me. This is what I was going to call out, the saying, nobody cares, work harder. That's my parents, 100%. It was the real estate markets. My mom was a hairdresser and then became an agent, and that market goes like this. And now my dad's a mortgage broker, and that market goes like this.
Sure.
And it's just nobody cares. Like work harder, right? What are you going to do? So that's why it's hanging up there, dude. That is a mental toughness quote.
Yep.
Nobody cares. Work harder. Like that's again controlling the controllables. I can't control a lot of stuff. I can control how I show up and how hard I work every single day. And that's 100% from my mom and dad.
Yeah, that's powerful. That is powerful stuff, man. It's amazing what we take with us from our childhood, and specifically our parents. If our parents were present in our lives and had any type of care for us on our future, it's just, and as a parent, as now, what we say, what comes out of our mouths to our kids, man, that could last an entire lifetime. And it's really cool. I know yours are young. Sometimes you're talking to your kids, and I'm passing on Nick Sabanisms to my kids when they're little, and it just looks like it goes right over their heads. But 6 months later, out of nowhere, they just regurgitate it back to you, and you're like, oh, okay, you are paying attention. Maybe this is working. So that's awesome. I love it. I love that you have that hanging up as well. I know you're young, relatively speaking. You got a lot of work to do in front of you, a lot of great success to accomplish. But given everything you've been through so far, personally and professionally, have you thought about what you want your legacy to be, not just for your family, but also for your company as well? What types of things are you thinking about in terms of your mentality, your mental toughness, your success, and what do you see for yourself ultimately down the road in several years into the future?
I think I want my legacy to be that like we created a business and a program and really like a best in class process to help people through transitions. And at the end of the day, like life is a series of transitions. I went from I got married at 39, had a son at 38. So I went from the single bachelor, business only, to a dad and a husband, and from an employee to an owner. And from 39, now I'm 40 and going through that transition. It's just so if the way that we approach this problem that we solve, which is like loss of identity and loss of purpose, if what we build here can become like a foundation and a baseline that other people can use, not just for the transition out of uniform, but other transitions, that would be a dream for me. And because of that, like you're going to end up, we've already impacted thousands of people. And I think we can impact people in the tens of millions of people if we continue to do what we're doing. So that's what I'm hoping for, is that someday people will look back and be like, Shift Group changed my life. And we've heard it enough now that we know we can. It's really now just about getting the word out and helping as many people as possible. Because like when you help one person, it has second, third, fourth order effects on their family, their friends, their loved ones. It's not a small goal, but it's definitely an achievable goal.
Well, it's amazing. And I know that I've said this already, but I really love the mission. Our missions are aligned. I'm working with people in business as well, but of course, my athletic background and writing the book, Victory Outside the Arena, I wanted to help that transition somewhere. Somebody out there is just like I was sitting on a floor somewhere going,
Yeah.
man, what now? Like, where did everybody go? Where's the parade? So I think what you're doing is outstanding. And you're right. It's amazing when you start this mission, you don't just hear from athletes. I've heard from people that have written my book that were never athletes, but they worked a career for 40 years and now they're going through some sort of transition, figuring out what the next step is and what the next chapter is. So continue to do this great work, JR. But I want you to just tell the audience where people can connect with you, where they can find out more about the company. If they've got some way to assist in any way, maybe they've got candidates or maybe they're looking for people. How can people keep up with what you're doing at Shift Work?
Yeah, they can find us at shiftgroup.io is our website. And I'm a pretty good follow on LinkedIn, JR Butler. I tend to say, call it how I see it, which, so you're either going to love me or you're going to hate me. And that's the point. But yeah, I would say follow me on LinkedIn and check out our website. We clearly have a clear contact us page, whether you're an athlete or a veteran, or athletes and veterans looking for help, or you're a company and you want to hire these types of people. That's the best place to find us.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it.
Keep doing what you're doing, Bill. That's all I can ask you for, brother. We're like you said, we share the same mission. So the more people on it, the better.
Have a great 2025.
You too, brother.
Okay. Thanks, JR.